G'day YouTube, Michael from BeYourBestSelf.fitness here, joined today with Zac. Zac is one of my clients and we have been working together for quite a while now, also one of my friends. We should mention that as well. But Zac has just finished bulking, so he was able to put on how much, Zac?
Nearly 10 kilos.
Nearly 10 kilos. So that's actually a big achievement for Zac. Before we started working together, he was one of those unfortunate people, or in other people's opinions, probably fortunate, to struggle to put on mass, struggle to put on weight. So it's quite an achievement to actually put on 10 kilos. So I might get Zac to talk to us a little bit about the things that he was doing before we started working together and maybe why that wasn't very effective for him.
So I guess before we started to train, I walked into the gym, had no previous experience in there, hadn't done any research on lifting techniques and such. So I kind of just took the advice of the people around me and went with what you call a bro split. High reps at low weight, thinking that was going to do something. Hadn't looked much into nutrition, no strength training, anything like that really. So it kind of just became repeating the same thing on machines instead of free weights and getting very frustrated with no results.
Very common. And look, to be honest, it's even something that I did when I first started out in the gym too. And it's something I found a lot of trainers prescribing me for the different gyms that I went to. So it's a little baffling when I actually started, researching and training myself and getting my qualifications as a trainer, looking back at the sort of advice that I got from trainers. And but like you mentioned, in the bro community, there's a lot of these things that go around in terms of your sets of 12, jumping on the machines all the time, and it's just not very effective. So without going into that too much just yet, what sort of things changed when we started working together?
Well, I guess we discussed things like training for strength. You taught me the difference between an isolation movement and compound movements, which I think was a big thing. And macros and nutrition, which was something that I hadn't looked into yet. I mean, everyone knows eat and drink protein, but there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, and even carbs is a big one there too. A lot of guys talk about carbing up when they're trying to bulk up. So Zac mentioned talking about compound movements versus isolation. That's obviously a big one. I think where a lot of people go wrong, especially in this day and age where we've got Instagram and YouTube, is we're seeing a lot of these pro athletes, pro bodybuilders sharing their workouts, which do tend to be quite high rep sort of stuff, and then we're not taking into consideration a few things like how long they've been training for, the sort of level that their body's at, and what they need to do in order to continue to grow when they're already probably close to their genetic potential perhaps. But another really big contributing factor to that, I believe, is the use of performance enhancing drugs. So what a lot of these top athletes don't tell us, and I'm not saying do or don't, or I'm against it or not against it, but I think it's important to understand that when you're using performance enhancing drugs, your training style can change drastically and getting different results. So when you're using performance enhancing drugs, higher rep training is actually very, very effective for building mass. But when it comes to somebody who's not using those performance enhancing drugs and trying to do those high rep sets, like RIP Rich Piano used to do 40 and 50 rep sets on his arms, and look at how big those things are. But if I was to do that, I really wouldn't get anything out of it because my body is just not acting the same way because of the chemicals that aren't in my system, I guess. But another thing is that these top level athletes will go into the gym, especially bodybuilders, and they're like, okay, I need to work on my upper chest and just fill out this little bit. But a new guy going into the gym who hasn't even really developed much of a chest already is getting on machines and doing these funky little exercises trying to isolate this little part of the chest, when really he just needs to get in there and do some bench press and actually build some strength and build some pecs to begin with. So I see a lot of that. I see a lot of young guys getting in and doing these really isolated movements, targeting a single muscle or a single section of a muscle, when really they haven't developed the overall muscle. So it's very, very ineffective in that sense. So that's a huge one. So you were able to then, looking at nutrition, I mentioned carbing up. So one of the biggest things that I found when it came to putting on mass was actually my fat intake. And the reason that was important was because fat carries 9 calories per gram, whereas carbohydrates only have 4 calories per gram. So you can go to all the trouble of carbing up and eating massive pasta and bread and rice and all those things and fill yourself up till you're bloated. but you're getting half the amount of calories that you could if you ate the same amount in fat. Now, obviously, we don't want to eat that much fat, but it can be a big contributor in actually upping our calories. So, but tracking calories is probably the biggest thing, because then you become more aware of what you're actually, what's in your food and how much you're actually eating. You know, I know a lot of guys who will, and I mentioned this in our last video, say they're eating tons and not putting on any weight until they actually start to track and realize
they're not eating that much.
They're not eating that much, and they're not eating as much as they think. So now that you've been able to put on 10 kilos, muscle and body fat, obviously that comes with bulking. What are you looking at doing now, moving forward?
So I guess now I probably want to try and lose 4 to 5 kilos.
Okay.
Steadily. I don't want to go rush everything and lose any gains or strength or anything like that. And yeah, just try and improve the physique, and just go from there, I think.
So what sort of time frame are you putting on that, do you think?
Probably around 3 months. I don't want it to be like I'll go into calorie deficit, but I don't want to do anything too drastically. And just take it from there, I think.
Okay. So what Zac's mentioned is, I think, really important, and because we've spoke about this before, in terms of trying to maintain what you've done. I mean, you've been bulking, you've been able to put on some size, which has been a struggle. You don't want to just then go and lose all of that for the sake of trying to drop some body fat. So we're going to look at putting together a plan for Zac so that he can maintain the strength and the muscle that he's been able to put on while bulking, and we're just going to do our best to target some of that body fat. So let's have a look at long term. Where do you see yourself in, say, a year's time? Currently you're 70 kilos, is that right? Yep.
So, but obviously at a higher body fat percentage. So I think 12 months time I'd like to go and do a cut now. Then from there, bulk, but possibly a lot more leaner. Take a bit longer to do it, to try and get back to 70 kilos, but at a lower body fat percentage. Okay,
excellent. So you're indicating that you've learnt something from this bulk. Tell us a little bit about that.
I think nutrition plays a big part. I mean, you see, like we've talked before, people on performance-enhancing drugs will go out and almost eat whatever they want. I mean, as long as they put the work in. But I think when you're natural, you can't just go and eat huge amounts of junk food and carry on, because then, you know, your carbs are gone for the period of the day before you've even really intaken any nutrition. And then you've got to try and get your protein and fat up. So I think it definitely, you've got to look at what you're eating and try and structure your day from there.
Okay, so you're talking in terms of macros. So Zac and I have worked together on macros and percentages of his total calorie intake. But another thing that I want to add to that is actually the nutritional value of our food. So a lot of times when guys are bulking or using bulking as an excuse, you know, they go out and just eat as many burgers as they can or as much pizza as they can. And while I think that's important in small parts, because we need that sort of mental release of eating some junk food, but I don't want bulking to be the excuse for having a really crappy diet. So we still want to ensure that we're getting the nutritional value out of our food, so that we actually feel good, we feel healthy. Even though we're putting on size, we're trying to limit the amount of body fat that we're putting on, and we're trying to increase the amount of energy that we have, and you know, the readiness that our body is for putting on muscle. And you know, if we're eating a bunch of junk food, then we're going to feel lazy. You know, we're not going to have the vitamins and minerals that we need. So it's going to carry over and affect everything. So even though we're bulking, still coming up with a good macro plan, and even though you can fit anything into your macros, we still want to have high quality food. So as much fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, lean meats, you know, those kinds of things, food in its natural state, in its raw state, as much as possible. And then just, if we can stick to that for the majority of our week, 5 or 6 days if you can, then it gives you that opportunity to then have that splurge, have a cheat meal or a cheat day, and, you know, enjoy yourself, go out with your friends. Obviously, as long as we're not overdoing it, you know, you don't want to write yourself off on alcohol and stuff, because it's going to carry over into your following week in terms of how effective your training is going to be. So we always need to be smart, but I'm definitely a believer in having that time where you can just relax. And it also is good for our metabolism. If you're restricted for a long period of time, your metabolism will slow down. Your body's going to shut down a little bit in terms of how much energy output it's got. So having that cheat day is going to help fire up the metabolism again. And there is even research to suggest that, you know, having a cheat week, for example, every 4 to 6 weeks can also help boost the metabolism as well. But again, that's not about just having junk food for a week. It's about increasing your calories for a week more than what you have been, so that your body's like, all right, I've got some fuel, I've got some energy. Let's ramp up the engines again. Let's get all 8 cylinders firing. And then we go back into that deficit, and you continue to lose that body fat again. So coming into the new plan, Zac's looking to drop 4 to 5 kilos in the next 3 to 4 months. Then we're going to reassess where he's at, how he feels, how he looks, and then most likely do another bulk and try and do that leaner so that he's not putting on as much body fat, and then continue to do another cut from there. So we'll cycle bulking and cutting.
Yep.
And then I'm sure there'll be a little period in there where he's just going to probably just maintain for a period of time, so that it's not as much energy on meal prep and those sort of things as well. So coming into this new plan, I've spoken to Zac about this already, we want to maintain his strength. So in order to do that, I don't want to just go in and say, all right, you're cutting now, let's do a whole bunch of cardio. So we want to maintain strength and muscle mass. So one of the ways that we're going to do that is with his training program. So Zac's actually moving into a new program that I put together for him involving top sets. Now top sets is where, so it's powerlifting focused, and this is where he's going to work up to a heavy set. So if he's doing sets of 6 for the day, he's going to work up to basically a 6 rep max, which is going to be about 80% of his 1 rep max. He's going to perform that, then he's going to drop 5% off, or drop down to 75% of his 1 rep max, and then continue his other 2 sets of 6 from there. So what that does is it's still getting the body used to handling some heavy weights. We're still hitting those strength rep ranges with some good weight on there, and then just pulling back and continuing to get some volume in, because he's not going to probably have the energy that he did when he was bulking. So we're going to just make sure that we're working within the framework that we've got. So a little less energy, so we're going to hit a heavy set to start with. It's going to fire up the central nervous system, train in that strength range, and then drop the weight back just a touch so that he can continue to do the remainder of those sets for the same rep range as well. So, and then he's also got some hypertrophy work in there as well. So we're focusing on the strength focus training for those compound moves that Zac mentioned. And then we're moving into the accessories and the secondary movements with hypertrophy training. So arms, shoulders, abs, all those things we're going to be hitting higher rep ranges so that we're getting the best of both worlds in that sense. A bit of a hybrid program, building strength but also maintaining some mass. And then the only difference being we're throwing in some high intensity interval training as well.
Yes.
So I've mentioned this to Zac and he's started this already. So what are the things that you've done so far?
So I've been doing a lot of work on the ropes.
Okay, battle ropes.
Obviously everything's after training weights,
Yep.
so that's how I wanted to do it. I wanted to put most of my focus into strength.
Sure.
But yeah, afterwards definitely hit the ropes.
Yep.
A few sessions on the boxing bag and pads.
Okay.
And possibly even a little bit on the push bike.
Yep.
But everything high intensity.
High intensity. So the reason we're doing high intensity is because we want to activate as many of our muscles as possible. We want to be blowing out our lungs as fast as possible. So we want to keep this short. High intensity interval training is great because it's very, very short training but has a long-term benefit. So the research proves that our metabolism stays quite elevated after our high intensity training. So we can get it done in a short period of time and then still get a couple of hours benefit rather than having to jog on a treadmill for an hour. So Zac's mentioned doing some battle ropes. So he's just doing, say, 6 or 8 sets where he's going for maybe 20 seconds, having a rest for 30 or 40 seconds, and then going back and continuing that as well. So still blowing out the lungs, still really upping the heart rate, and training his body to recover quicker and quicker as well. So like you mentioned, you can throw in some rounds on the spin bike. You can basically do anything with high intensity training. You can do sets of deadlifts or squats with a lighter weight, obviously, and throwing it in after your workout. So you've done your strength training, you're not fatiguing yourself before you go in and do your strength training, but you are then just getting that finished burn, really blowing out the lungs and just making sure that we're targeting the fat with our cardio. So the last piece of the puzzle comes with nutrition. So in order to, again, maintain as much muscle mass as we can while targeting body fat, we want to keep our deficit quite narrow. So what I mean by deficit is there's a certain amount of calories that our body is going to burn on a daily basis at rest, and then also when we introduce some exercise. So for Zac, that was around 2,600 calories. So we're going to try and maintain a deficit of around 300 to 500 calories. So by going too far, let's say we're doing 1,000 calories less a day, then what's going to happen is the body's going to be starved of nutrients, it's going to be starved of energy, and it's going to be more likely to start breaking down muscle for energy and for protein. So we want to maintain that gap quite small, so 300 to 500, maybe 200 on some days. And that's going to do a couple of things. It's going to make sure that his body's not starving of nutrients, but it's going to need a little bit, so it's going to pull from fat, especially if we're doing the right kind of training. We're stimulating a lot of muscle by doing strength training and also high intensity cardio. And it's also going to give him the energy to exercise as well. So if we're too aggressive in terms of our deficit, then you're just going to be out of energy. You're not going to be training as intensely as you'd like to, and maybe not as often as you'd like, because there might be that night where you're like, I just really don't feel like going to the gym. So we want to make sure that we feel good, we're getting really good quality training sessions in, and our body is really, humming along, running on 8 cylinders as best we can, so that we're feeling good, we're training well, and we're burning as much fat as possible and sparing that muscle. So you're going to be looking at about 300 calories, and it's been an adjustment for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, again, it focuses a lot on, you need to look at good nutrition so that your calories and macros go further, in a sense.
Yeah, sure. So what happens when our body is starving of nutrients is that it starts to crave things. So, and a lot of times, if you're craving energy, your body's going to tell you want sugar, because it knows that it's a quick energy burst. So when we can start to create some really good habits in our nutrition, those cravings are going to actually diminish. So if you're not eating a lot of sugary food, your body's not going to be craving a lot of sugary food. So that's why I think it's important to maintain that strict plan for about 5 or 6 days a week, so that you don't give your body that sort of option of like, hey, that sugary treat's there, it's in the house, I'm going to go and smash it. And there's trigger foods for all of us. So for me, chocolate is a big one. So what I did to curb that is started buying no sugar chocolate. Definitely not as awesome as real chocolate, but it's there when I sort of have that craving, and I can have it, and it really doesn't sort of spike that craving in me. So if I've got some real chocolate in the fridge and I just think I might have a nibble, man, that bar's gone. So avoiding those trigger foods can really help with sticking to your diet, sticking to your plan, and having those high quality foods. So when your body's got all the vitamins and minerals and nutrients that it needs, it's actually a lot less likely to be craving that quick burst of energy from our sugar. The other thing is actually having a high level of fat in there as well. So fat is very satiating, meaning that it helps us to feel fuller for longer, and it's a much slower release of energy. So avoiding sugary cereals and things like that really helps, again, because as soon as that sugary energy wears off, we have a bit of a crash and we go straight back for something sugary to pick us up again. So if we can maintain a higher level of fat in that macro ratio, then we're going to feel fuller for longer, we're going to have longer lasting energy, and we can make sure that the amount of carbs that we've allocated is going to be from good stuff like your fruits and vegetables. And then obviously, the weekend or Friday night or whatever, we can just have that little splurge and just avoid that leaking into those other days. Just keep it to that one time and let it be a reward. You've done good throughout the week, you've trained hard, you've eaten well, and kick back and enjoy yourself. So that's the plan. We're going to check back in with Zac. Zac's obviously going to be posting his progress on his channel. Do you want to give a little shout out?
Yeah, we might link it below if you don't
mind. We'll definitely link it below.
Gains of Valhalla, YouTube, Instagram, all those socials.
Yep, awesome. So keep in touch with Zac and see how he's going with that. We'll obviously touch base again. We'll be reassessing after that 3 months, see where he's at and see what the next phase of his training will be. But for now, that's probably more than enough information, so we'll wrap it up. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you like the video, then like it. If you want to see more, then subscribe, and check out my website, beyourbestself.fitness, for more customized programs, tutorial videos, and more.